So I'm going to start off with the intro here, and then I guess we'll just kind of jump into it from there. But hey guys, what is up? My name is Lord Nick, and welcome to another episode of the Dangerous Game Podcast. It's going to be episode number 22. Big difference this time around is I'm going to be joined today by a friend of mine named Sarc. We've been friends for a long time. He likes to criticize my gameplay quite often. So I thought, what a better person. There's not really a better person to involve with analytically breaking down what to take away from each of the finals of each of the top four regions, right? We have EU, North America, Korea, and China. And we're going to kind of take away whatever we watched of these games. We're going to kind of compare what we saw from their metagames and stuff, and specific choice of picks across different roles that we thought were either unique or stood out to us or might be impactful, and how you can apply that to your solo queue climb, specifically towards the NA experience, as it seems that the more people seem to struggle the most in NA opposed to most of the other regions in terms of trying to figure out the metagame for solo queue. So to jump into it, I guess let's start off with the one that I think is going to have one of the lower bearings on anything that we talk about today, or at least for me. And that's EU. And my feeling for that is that G2 is an unpredictable whirlwind of picks generally. And I don't generally like trying to break down things that you can learn from them to get better at the game, because I feel a lot of their playstyle comes down to just being mechanically better than almost everybody else that they are against. And then on top of that, having some pretty good teamwork coordination on there. But, generally it does definitely feel like 5 solo queue players just kind of dominating the crap out of their competition, to me at least. But what did you happen to watch any of the, in terms of the EU games, did you watch any of the finals for EU?
Yeah, I watched all the games.
Okay,
It
so
was a while ago, though. I don't remember a ton about it, to be honest.
okay, so I did not watch almost anything from them. I watched game one, and that was probably the closest to a standard G2 comp I had seen G2 play. But other than that, most of their compositions were like front to back, which was really weird to me. Just because stylistically they don't play front to back usually. I've seen G2 play a lot of just like goofy shit all over the place, like Bard Syndra bot lane, or some type of roaming support or something like that. But it felt like they put Mickey on a lot of more laning supports, and something I also found odd was Caps played Kog'Maw, which I didn't think was something that he generally did. But in terms of like this series, or just in general from EU, I guess for the whole season. So let's talk about Fnatic or G2, I guess, from just because they were the two in the finals. Was there anything that really kind of stood out from their teams, or what they did specifically, that you think would be a good thing to take away and to look at to improve somebody's solo queue experience?
Yeah, G2 plays whatever they want, and they still win. Like, that means that you should focus on your own playstyle and how you want to play the game instead of trying to force yourself into whatever people think is strong. Not that you shouldn't try, but if you tried and it doesn't work for you, you don't need to force yourself into it.
Okay, that was the biggest thing I see from G2, and that's like the biggest thing that I could ever like pull away from them, because like I can't really break down their champion choices and be like, this is the greatest solo queue choice for every player just because they did it. I hate that kind of approach to looking at pro play. But I generally, one of the big things I do like to look at, opposed to just like, hey, this pick is so phenomenal, is why it worked for them, opposed to, why it will definitely work for you. I feel like that's just very it's not true, because it's not gonna work for everybody. Obviously, like not everybody's gonna be able to play Pike top. That's just not. It's not gonna be the case. Wonder can do it because he's just apparently extremely comfortable on Pike and is very good at that. But like, I 100% agree. Like, it's definitely, find that thing that you are comfortable on and just kind of go with it, which I think is completely different than, like, NA, right? Like, a lot of the big fault that NA has had competitively has been the fact that they constantly are trying to imitate Korea or now China or to an extent now EU because they're even pulling a lot of EU players now, or have been for a while, been pulling a lot of EU players, and it feels like they're just trying to mimic whatever meta seems to be coming the strongest, right? Like, I don't feel like they ever kind of focus on themselves, which has been a real big weak point for a lot of teams. Um, but so what about like Fnatic though? So like G2, obvious answer there. Like, they play over the fuck they want and they dominate. What about Fnatic? Like, do you think they came second um, in the actual split and um, in the final playoffs run they took second. So obviously they're doing something right. They're consistently towards the top. Do you feel like they kind of follow that same path, or do they kind of do something different?
Honestly, I was super thrown off because, by the way, the LEC was hyping it up. It seemed like they were going to be a lot closer in skill. Not only that, but before that, Fnatic was looking really good. And then, I guess, the gap between them and G2 is actually just huge too. But from what I remember from the games, none of them were like remotely even that close, which I did not expect at all. Like, I'm not sure what happened other than I think that G2's gameplay is just, I don't know if it's faster paced or just different than the other teams. Like, because usually with Fnatic, it felt like they could just sit back and do what they want and capitalize on the other team's mistakes. But with G2, it feels like they don't let you sit back. Like, they're always trying to do something or make a play somewhere on the map. And once you fall behind a little bit to them, they don't stop. Like, with a lot of teams, it feels like there's a back and forth, where one guy gets caught out, and then they make a play somewhere else on the map, to kind of counter that.
Mm-hmm.
And it always feels like either G2 does it at the right time all the time, or G2 does it in the sense of they do it when the other team doesn't have a chance to make a play on the other side of the map, or they always seem to force plays when the other team isn't expecting it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because, like, for the most part, when a team is forcing plays, the other team, when they're like pretty evenly matched, the other team is predicting, like, let's say their jungler is making a play top side, the enemy team has like a play going on bot side, and it's usually around the same timing. But with G2, it feels like they're just always making a play, and the other team isn't in a position to make a play. So I don't know what was up with that. If it just has to do with G2 understanding rotations better, or when to apply pressure. But I think the other major thing is that I don't think what you said about G2 being like 5 solo queue players that are really mechanically gifted is even a big thing, because I don't think Yankos or Perks are really that mechanically good. Like, I thought Perks was at first, but watching him recently and with the role swap and stuff, he's just really good at understanding when to trade and when he has the advantage and where he should be on the map. Because he never
Mm-hmm.
does like any play where it's like, wow, he had to have like some crazy like mouse, clicking ability or some shit. It's usually a play where it's like, wow, he was just always in the right spots where he couldn't get hit and the enemy team had to walk towards him. Do you know what I mean? Or he was always replying to a gank or a like either his teammates getting ganked or himself getting ganked properly. Like, he always seems to be making the right like logical move. Even without
Okay.
vision of the team or something.
I could see that. Yeah, I could definitely see maybe it's a bit of overestimation saying they're all five just solo queue mechanical gods. I think honestly though, Yankos does bring quite a bit of that mechanical skill along with his ridiculous good like positioning, but like I feel like also like the biggest fault that Yankos generally will have sometimes is being over kind of the same fault that I end up having in a but him being better at the game, it's often not often abused as often. Often, not often is abused of, whatever. Anyhow, it's not abused as much. It used to be a lot where he just overextend a lot, right? Like, before they kind of came to this iteration of G2, the biggest, like, one of the biggest faults G2 had before they had, like, the caps on the team and stuff, before they became this giant super team, was, like, outside of their bot lane being considered kind of meh, Yankos was causing a lot of problems by overextending without having that, backup of the rest of the team now. And now it feels like each one of them is kind of filling in that role to enable each other to do all types of stupidly aggressive and overplay a hand that would be usually abused by almost everybody else. But because of how their team is responding, how much trust they have in each other, it definitely feels like, that aspect of it is definitely not solo queue, right? Like, they have so much faith that they're going to get follow-up from somebody else on the team that they can just do these crazy, absurd plays that shouldn't work for almost any situation, but they consistently work a lot just because they have so much backup, and they feel like it feels like they're kind of just smurfing on actual pro players just because, it just seems like they just know so much more about the game than everybody else. But in honesty, to me, watching them, it just feels like they're just so confident that they are better at their role compared to almost anybody else. It just feels like they're all kind of, except for maybe Perks, who is, often, if anybody is behind, it seems like he might be the person that falls behind sometimes, but that's specifically just so that he's not giving them, like, kills, and like you said, he's playing safer, he's not giving up, and they can't really catch him, they can't really kill him, they can't really abuse him, and he might fall behind a little bit in farm, but that doesn't really end up, like, hurting him in the long run.
Oh wait, you haven't really been watching it all, bro. They're
so
scary though.
So, did you see the
Caps
Mad
was the
Lions?
one
Did
getting
you see?
shit on.
Well, yeah, Caps and Craps is just a whole coin flippy bullshit that I don't want to get into because I feel like that's just a whole thing on its own of why you shouldn't play like Caps. But but no. So like, did you see the Mad Lions game? The one game that they actually took off at G2. What happened that game?
The one? Oh, you mean
The Mad
one
Lions series. So where
you
they
mean the loser series, right? Not the winner series.
so it's the loser series. So it went. So the way that it all worked out was like G2 had to climb their way back through the losers bracket, which was kind of weird. But like Fnatic versus Mad Lions, Fnatic kind of crushed Mad Lions. They go over to the G2. G2 gets a 2-0 lead, and then game 3 get crushed by Mad Lions. Like, they're beating, like, there's times where it's just looking like, oh, okay, this is where G2 bounces back and wins it, and then all of a sudden something goes horribly wrong. Like, Perks was playing so safe on Rumble that it actually ended up costing them a lot. Like, where he's usually that static kind of rock player where he plays safe, doesn't take the fights where he can't really win them. It just felt like he never took a fight that game. Like, I don't know what happened there. He just fell back to that point where he just decided just not to take a fight. And
right, you're talking about the game that they lost to Mad Lions, right?
where he was playing Rumble mid, yeah, like, it's so, like...
Wait, what? The game that they lost to Mad Lions in semis was...
Was that the Rumble mid game?
versus LeBlanc. No.
Was that which one was the Rumble mid game? Was that just earlier in the season? I was rewatching a video recently, and they were reviewing that game. I guess it must have been during the season.
They might have been winners, not losers.
Was that winners? Okay. So
the series were Mad Lions.
That was. I need to find that game. I don't know when that game was. I was recently rewatching it.
Win.
It was one where Mad Lions beat them, but it was like.
Oh, that's game 5 of the first.
That was game 5 of the first set for them? Okay.
Yeah.
So that specific game... Sorry. I'm losing track of which games are which, and I'm trying to go back and remember them.
Fucking Clown Fiesta.
That game was fucking nuts. And rewatching it recently, I was just like, good God.
It's the one where they had the Bard, right?
Yeah.
Right? And
yeah, Mickey was popping fucking off on
bro.
Bard, dude. He was so goddamn good, but everybody else just felt like they were just playing like Caps. Like, they're all, except for Perks, like all the other three.
Nah, dude, Wonder was popping the fuck off that game. I felt bad for Wonder that game. Holy shit.
So, like, Caps was hard inting that game. Yankos wasn't really existent, and, like, I don't know, Olaf kind of got fed, so I guess Yankos just never got to do anything. And then, like, Perks was just like felt like he wasn't doing anything. Like he really just felt like he was just a body in a seat that game. Like it was so bad. But like, that was something that was just
I
interesting to me to
mean,
just see this massive change in these players. Right, like the only two that kept consistent in that game were Wonder and Mickey was a fucking god in that game.
I
But like
mean, they were behind the whole game though, right? From what I remember, they
there was
only.
a point that they almost got an ace and they went and took an objective or two and like it looked like the gold was about to even out and then they just fucking and then Caps just hard inted by himself again. Like it was a ridiculous fucking clown fiesta of a game, dude. And but so like the point that I was bringing to that one is the perks, it's better not to give a sometimes better not to give a kill and just kind of play back and farm up. And even if I'm going down a bit, we're gonna come back. Where he doesn't. It never feels like he's losing because they're outplaying him. It feels like he kind of chooses to lose some when he is losing in the lane. He's choosing to lose in lane in most situations to prevent them from getting even farther ahead. Right, like anytime
Uh,
that's what I was trying to say. Like sometimes that's what it is. That specific game was the only real example I could think of where he's
like,
not doing that though.
I think that game he wasn't really in a position to do anything though. Like he's
He
playing a melee, he's
he's
playing a
put
melee champion with a Q that like you need to be standing on top of them to do damage, and everyone on the other team was stronger than him, and everyone on the other team beats him, and
yeah.
whether it be 1v1 or in a team fight, like if he goes in the melee range with them, because it's a
He
fucking.
also itemized really weird. Like so he was only slightly behind, but then he went for a full defensive item and put himself even farther behind because he didn't get Leandri, so he couldn't really bounce back at like the point that Rumble usually power spikes. I
I don't think his job was to kill people this game. That's the biggest thing. I think their
It's not
top is based.
necessarily to kill them, but like if you have the Leanders with your R, right? Like that still just puts enough damage and threat that they can't really cross your R.
But I
But
don't think
without
their
it,
issue that game was doing enough damage. They have an 80 carry top and a fucking Ziggs. I feel like their whole comp was just Jarvan EQ Rs them into a little hole, and Rumble Rs them so they can't get away, and
Mhm.
then Wonder cleans up. Like, and his job wasn't to get in and go on top of them. The other thing is when I was saying he can't really go on top of them, right? So I think that's why he built Zonia so that he can R and then press QW and stand there Zonia while his Q is still going off. And then even if he dies, he'll do enough damage to where Wonder can clean up the fight. Like his job, they don't really have a pokey like try to
well, his
play it
job
out.
there is to do an combo his R with either Jarvan or uh, with Wonder specifically to make sure that they can win those fights, right? Like, so if that's the case, then if he's not worried about getting in melee to people, why build the Zonias? Build the Leandri so you can sit farther back, just drop your R on them and do
And
damage.
I don't think just doing his R would have been enough though, especially since he was behind.
It's a possibility. It was a situation where I felt like he played super safe and like if he'd done the normal, we're not giving, that
I think it makes sense to play super safe against that team though. Like who on that team does he want to like use all his skills and go towards? Like I'd rather be the enemy champion in all those situations. A set versus a rumble and he's walking in the melee range of you. And then a Syndra, he's trying to walk melee range of you, you can just poke him out and kite him away. A Kiana, like you want to be melee range. And Olaf, your biggest problem is that people run away from you. So if the guy's running at you, like that's perfect for you. And then it's a
so
fucking Maokai. Like I don't
so
really get what you want Rumble to do to be running at that team,
I
especially when
don't
he's
I don't want
behind.
him to be running at them, but I want him to be doing damage. If he's not able to do damage with his normal abilities, you need to augment what you can do damage with, right? Like putting yourself
Yeah,
even
and I think
safer so that you do no damage and you offer nothing to your team is really bad. Like you can't rely on you have a damage based mid laner. No matter what, Rumble that's what Rumble is. He is all in just a crap ton of damage. But
but his
if you,
team works way better when he can clump them into a little group. So I think his plan was get them to run at me, use all my shit in Zonias, and Jarvan can lock them in while Ziggs and Kalista clean up.
okay, so that's a fine plan if he ever implemented it that way, right? Like if you go back and watch the game, he never once set himself up to bait people in to come
Well,
at
yeah,
him.
yeah, yeah. If that's the plan, I'm saying I
If
don't
that's
think
the
that's
plan
the
with the
plan.
items,
Yeah,
he
yeah.
didn't implement
That,
it at all. That's the
I
big
mean,
thing. The way
that's the
he
thing
did
that
play, he should have had the Leandres because he never was near the fights. He always just pressed R and was all the way in the back line, never near
I
anything.
mean,
So
the
from the
other
way he
issue
played, he should have had the Leandres in that
is,
respect.
yeah, yeah. The other issue is that's what he wanted to build for, but that doesn't mean that he was ever in a position to actually do that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it looks like just from the build and the gold difference, he probably was dying way too fast even with the Zonias.
Yeah, so like the biggest problem that came down is he built the Zonias for safety to try to bait people in, right? Or at least this is the principle that we're kind of agreeing that he probably did this for. The problem is how he implemented it there. So, while yes, it's an item that keeps you safe, it's an item that could potentially help you, extend fights so that your team can collapse in and Olaf burns ulti. They use a lot of their stuff to get into the fight, and now they can't kill you. That's a great, idea in principle, but the problem was is he just didn't do any damage, so they didn't care. Like, right? Like, if all he has is Zonias, he doesn't do any damage as Rumble. So they just don't care. Like, they ignore him, and half the time where he was positioned like he's playing a mage and was way behind his team anyways, or off to the side, nowhere near his team, so he wasn't threatening with his basic abilities anyways. And he dropped down his ulti to try to zone them into the fight, and so, like you said, Olaf just wants to kind of go in, so the only actual kind of threat was Wonder, like you said. Caps was kind of running it down. He was doing okay damage to turrets and stuff because he zigs, but like he really didn't do anything in team fights most of the time. There was a few Mega Inferno bombs that were really good, but that was about it. And
I remember him not really doing anything at all.
yeah, there's a really
Honestly, I remember
great
everyone on the team not really doing anything at all except for
yeah,
Wonder.
except Wonder and Mickey. Those were the two that I really remember doing anything, and that was because Yankos basically did an I'm helping ulti in almost every fight, which was just really unfortunate and uncharacteristic of Yankos, but I don't really feel like there was much he could do with the fact that, you pick the Jarvan to
like
complement the Rumble, but then the Rumble's way behind, so Jarvan, who's
that's what I mean though. Like,
yeah.
well, he was definitely sacrificing himself a few times to maybe mitigate like the amount that the enemy team could take once they all die, because Yankos was probably gonna die anyway. But yeah, the other thing was, I think they were just too behind. Like, I don't
Mhm.
think Perks played that way because he doesn't know how to play Rumble. I mean, they won a game with him on Rumble the game before, and he's aggressive as
Yeah,
fuck. The
exactly.
other, the biggest thing is he's only aggressive when it makes sense to him, and I don't think there was any position on in the game where he realistically had a situation where he could start a fight and they would actually win it. It's
So,
like the same thing as if someone were really behind against Perks,
mhm.
and Perks was on the enemy team and they were ahead, or rather, if the roles were switched, Perks or G2 would just make it look like the enemy Rumble didn't know when to go in because he never had a chance to because he's too far behind. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
There's like there's some games where you just don't have a chance to come back because there aren't any openings. And I don't think that's
Yeah.
a sign of a player being bad at a champion. I think
I'm not
that's
I'm
a sign of the other team knowing what they're doing. Like,
I'm not arguing he's bad at a champion. I'm just arguing that he took an approach that then didn't work out because he went, he just where his general playstyle generally works for the benefit of the team. In this specific case, it hurt the team because of just what ended up happening overall as a team, right?
I
It wasn't
honestly
necessarily
don't think
his fault.
Million would have
It
changed
it
anything.
wasn't necessarily his fault that caused them to lose, but he definitely didn't end up assisting them anyway. He basically became a body in a seat where he's usually that rock that keeps everybody together and allows them to do a lot of things. Because while the rest of them can play, massively overextending and do all these stupid things, like you said, he's generally a very safe person. He's very hard to get to, and he plays his champion not mechanically better than everybody else to the point that he's a god by comparison, but he plays it well enough to the point that he is never the reason they lose, and he's a rock that keeps them kind of stable. But in this specific case, because he didn't end up taking those risks because he didn't get ahead. He didn't end up, he didn't build the Leandres to kind of just be like, all right, I'm dropping my ulti and running type thing. There was a lot of different fights that build pathing wise, based off of where he was positioned, how he kind of pictured himself having to play. Different itemization probably would have assisted them a little bit more in these ones. Like the idea of why he went the way that he did makes sense. He's behind. He needs to be defensive. He's probably going to use himself as bait to try to get people into good fights. His team was never really positioned for these things. Caps is running it down. There's a lot of outside situations that made not necessarily his fault for it, but implementation on it definitely. Like you said, the game before he popped off on Rumble. So like it's they draft. I feel like in the draft specifically, they kind of lost it themselves there as well because they picked. If I remember correctly, they picked the Jarvan into the Olaf, which was just to me kind of like a what face kind of moment because, or no, they picked Jarvan first and then it was Olaf after, but like which a lot of the casters were like, why are they picking Olaf? But it's like the principle of it was that they built this team fight comp and then they just didn't give any situation to allow Perks to do anything, right? Early on, he gets ganked, gets killed, and then just like is behind, roams to try to help at one point. I think he died again, and like again is farther behind now. Like he's just in a situation he can't do anything anymore, but he still has to itemize safety wise because he thinks he's going to be doing one way and then doesn't get to play that way. There was a lot of problems overall with that one game for them. But the big highlight I wanted to point here is that just because one player is generally the rock for a team and because he's consistently still a good player no matter what, just because he had this one loss, didn't mean that he's, I'm not calling him crap. He's not. He's obviously not. He's, they're top of freaking EU for what, 3 splits in a row now? 3 splits in a row, world semifinalists, won MSI last year. Like, the guy is good. It's just, we got to look at a game where they kind of lost to kind of look at that kind of chink in the armor because the biggest thing you learn from is mistakes. So looking at where his mistakes were on the best mid laner and, one of the best mid laner in EU and arguably one of the best in the world, I think still, just even though mechanically he might not be the best, he's still consistently, again, not really the reason his team loses, right? Like he's never causing the faults for his team in most situations. Even in this situation where they lost, he wasn't the reason, but he definitely did not help mitigate the reasons that were causing them to lose to a degree. But
I guess my biggest point is I don't think you're calling Prince bad. I think my point is you're focusing on something that is completely, in my opinion, irrelevant to whether or not they lost. Like him being more aggressive when they're like 5k goal behind doesn't really change anything. Like if you go and fight when you're 5k goal behind, you're still 5k goal behind. Like the only difference between that
I'm not
and
saying
what
being more
happened was
aggressive. It's
that
just
they got
having a different item because of the situation you're in. He went with a defensive item because they're behind. The problem is his champion does not scale that way, right? Like Rumble doesn't. You go defensive item on Rumble, you're gonna miss the power spike of your champion. Like the itemization he decided he had to go means that his champion, he has to play a different style of trying to bait them in. But if the enemy team is ahead and they realize you're not a threat, what is that bait option going to do for you, especially when you're not with your team? Like the whole premise of his item choice for what he ended up playing, how he ended up playing, I think is what really costed them a couple of the skirmishes. Not necessarily the game, but there's a couple skirmishes that could have gone better in their favor with just a bit more impact from him because he didn't do anything. Like we said, the only 2 that ever stood out on G2 that game were Wonder and Mickey, and he's supposed to be the rock, the solid place person. But because of the itemization he chose, he just didn't. There was options that he could have done something in that game, but the way he went, there wasn't any options that he could do. He went with a very safe option because it's the safer option. It prevents him from dying, but just because it prevented him from dying doesn't mean it's gonna, net them a win here in the end. It kind of ends up defeating the purpose of playing safe to prevent them from getting anything off of you, when you're not even necessarily playing safe because he kept dying from it anyways.
No, I mean my point wasn't that he built this item to play safe and just turtle and do nothing. I meant he doesn't need to do all the damage because he already has 2 major damage dealers on his team. Like,
but we pointed out the problem. Their ADC is not doing anything. He already is like missing most of his Qs. He isn't doing any actual damage.
Then don't you think that's more of the problem than that
so
to
take it on
both.
his own shoulders. He's a mid lane. He's not a support pick. Like Rumble is not a support pick. He's still a high damaging person pick. The whole point of picking Rumble is that you have his R as a disgustingly destructive tool, but he wasn't ever utilizing it. And yes, Cap's missing a lot of stuff is a big problem. But we were specifically talking about Perks in this game, and I specifically brought it up because this was a game that was notable because Perks didn't do anything. Craps happens. There's a whole fucking meme about that shit. Like we could analyze Caps every which way of like, hey, this game he's a fucking god, this game he's a fucking bot. Like that happens. That's expected of Caps. Oddly enough, as much as I don't want to say that, it's a coin flip if you're getting Caps or Craps. That's the joke for the LEC. That's the known quantity in the world. The thing that I was bringing up is specifically in this game is that this was a very uncharacteristic game of Perks. You know, generally when he's behind, he can build defensive, adjust how he plays, becomes an extreme solid player for the team because even though he's not putting out the damage, he's in a supportive role, he enables other people on the team to hard carry the game. Between Caps' issues in this game and Yanko's not being able to really do much because of the pick that they had with it now, right? Like his pick is an all-in kind of decision. There's only so much peel you can really do with Jarvan that doesn't get yourself potentially caught or without you having to really kind of go in and sacrifice yourself. He itemized, I think, the proper way to, for the style that he had to play on Jarvan there. But, like, at this point, they're putting so much eggs now in Wonder's basket because Caps is showing that he's in a craps game. After Zhonya's, or even before finishing the Zhonya's, right? Like, why complete the full way through the Zhonya's? I can kind of see getting the early stopwatch, having a little bit of defense there, maybe picking up a little bit of extra damage, but like you're early on in the game, they could already see Caps was not doing exactly everything he needed to do. He was fumbling quite a bit. Every time he did a good play, there was 2 bad plays. He could have adjusted in this game, like Perks is known for doing. It just felt like he didn't adjust to the situation. That's the point I was trying to make here. Not necessarily like this is 100% Perks' fault. I'm trying to point out the fact this was an uncharacteristic game for the player.
I honestly don't think Leandries would have been better for this team or in this game. Like,
I think it makes up for the fault of another player, though, right? That little bit of extra damage coming in from Perks. Perks isn't doing anything at this point, right? Like, all of his ultis were zoning ultis. None of them really landed on people in the end. He wasn't positioning them to really hurt people. He's trying to funnel them in. But we already pointed out that Olaf wants to get on them. Their whole team really is okay with either kiting or going all in from the other side. So, the zoning of the ulti was bad positioning. If he does it Leandries, he then feels like maybe, hey, I can drop it on them and actually do a crap ton of damage to them real fast, because even if they get off of it immediately, that Leandries burn is going to help, like, nuke a crap ton of that HP off their team. And so I just think, like, for what the player is known for, being able to adjust and acclimate to most situations, this was just an uncharacteristic game for him. And that was the only thing I was trying to point out.
Yeah, and I guess my only point is that still doesn't make sense to me. Like, building a Leandries over Zhonya's first in this game. Or, I don't know why he built the other items, but I understand the fucking Zhonya's at least.
I could get the Zhonya's, like I said, I could understand the reasoning for going with the Zhonya's, but I can only understand that if he wasn't as far behind. Being as far behind as he was, the Zhonya's doesn't offer you anything other than the ability for you to survive and do nothing with it. Like, you're now doing no damage on your champion. Your ulti is just for zoning, so you're putting even more in the basket, like I said, more into the basket of either Wonder or the player that's not doing anything this game. And I mean, I guess that speaks to the volumes of how much trust they have in each other. Is like he's putting himself in more of a supportive role so that Caps and Wonder can carry this, but Caps wasn't really doing enough to carry this. It fell into Mickey and Wonder's basket, and there was a couple of fights that they cleaned up that they shouldn't have just because Mickey and Wonder played out of their fucking mind. But Perks was very much a non-factor in this game, and the only thing I'm trying to point out is that he is a big non-factor, which is not something that he usually is. And I think I think a big fault to it.
I think it's just.
I think a big part came down to his item build, though.
The biggest thing is in this game, it wasn't a typical G2 game where when the fight starts, you see each G2 player coming in and contributing at a time
that was best for their
yeah. Like normally when you see a G2 game and there's a bunch of skirmishes, it always feels like the G2 players get there first, right?
Yeah.
Like you see them start fighting, and then the next guy that shows up is a G2 player, and then the other team shows up, and then another G2 player responds. But in this game, it was definitely they were like
Getting
fucking
caught out. They were getting. They were
or
getting.
they were showing up late to where like they couldn't
Mhm.
help it. It's like what you said with his ults. Like he was showing up late and then he'd ult and the ult was fucking useless. Like it wasn't killing anyone. It wasn't really doing anything.
Yeah, and
Versus
even
versus
if
like
he.
this other Rumble game where
Mhm.
he was showing up at the right time and dropping the ult and it wasn't just his own, right? It would be doing most of the damage. And I'm
Exactly.
assuming that's what the comp that they have here was trying to do again, where they would start a fight and Yankos could just lock them in. And as
And
soon as
then he's supposed to drop it on top of them,
yes,
nuke them
yes,
out, and
exactly. But the
exactly.
biggest problem is none of them were showing up at the same time. Like by the time he got there, like Yankos might have been already dead or already ulted and had to EQ away,
Mhm.
and then he didn't know where to drop his ult, and then Caps was missing everything. Like or makes he had to use his ult to like save himself or someone already. Like their
Yeah.
skills weren't dropping in a good sequence, and I
They
guess
were
with
getting caught. They were not
was
doing the catching like they were
yeah,
supposed to. Their
yeah.
comp is supposed to find picks, not get picked, and they were getting
Yeah,
picked constantly.
and the other thing is their team definitely seems like a team where they want to go around an objective, like let's say Dragon or Baron, and when you're forced to like walk up to it, that little like area in the jungle where the J4 ult can basically just cover the whole
Hmm.
area, they want to do that and then let Rumble ult you and let Caps and Wonder clean you up. Like, what I was assuming. It definitely seemed like a game where in solo queue, I never would have gave up because I would have thought we can win one fight and then
And
they're
they
gonna
almost did. They almost
yeah,
won too.
yeah, that's what
And
I
then
mean.
Caps fucked up his fucking combo. Did you see where he fucked up at the end?
No, he did it to dodge the Sinja stun, I think, so it didn't really matter. But
So, that last satchel charge, if he just threw it towards where they were their spawn, he could have positioned that so they couldn't get to him in time, and he could have just gotten that last shot off. It was one auto away from him finishing it,
no,
and
but
because he
if he
satcheled
didn't,
himself away and still got hit by the stun, he died. He just it was done for.
oh yeah, he still got hit by the stun, huh? I didn't think about that.
Like he was gonna get hit by the stun either way. There, if he positioned the satchel on the other side of it, he gets out of the stun. He lived through the stun. Like the stun wasn't what ended up killing him. What killed him was the other two members coming out and killing him. If he had the satchel positioned there, he knocks them back and gets another auto out and wins the game. He literally just a snap judgment call there, lost them the game. Not like that like was the whole reason that they lost the game. They ended up losing the game because like they had no there was no rhyme or reason they should have won. They literally were just playing the what do you call it? There's a certain approach to it that I can't think of what the hell that's called, where they're intentionally just running around and trying to get people out of position so they can try to get one person to go backdoor and stuff. It's such a goofy ass fucking style. But like that was their only chance of winning at that point, right? Like they had no way they could win team fights. They had no way to fight for objectives. They were so far out of the game at that point. They just lost it. And a big part of it was, that coordination that you said that G2 generally has, even in the game before that they showed. They just didn't have it. I don't know what caused it this game, but they were just playing like solo queue bots. Like it didn't feel like anything was coordinated on their side.
No,
Perks is taking a more defensive approach because obviously we're behind. We need to play a defensive approach. Maybe we need to try to bait them into us and do a sneakier way of doing our combo. But
I don't
then
think
nobody else was on that same page. Everybody else is like, no, we need to still fight this out. So like, I just feel like
I don't think it's just that.
except maybe Yanko's. Yanko's itemized to do that defensive style too. But then he
Or,
still went for picks. Like he still was trying to find picks by himself or with just Wonder or with just Caps. Like it was just some really bad decisions of like,
the
hey, we
biggest
have two
thing,
people and there's three of them here. But
the biggest thing I can say for Price's Sonya's instead of Andrews for sure though, is that it puts more control in your hands, if that makes sense.
yeah,
Versus, because
and
I
I don't
if
necessarily hate
me
it.
yeah if me going in and zone using to bait the other team to get a fight that favors me, that gives me some control, right? But if I'm building the Andrews and I'm already behind, like they have to really fuck up to
To be
for
able
me.
for you to do something,
Yeah,
yeah.
for me. Even if
It,
my ult lands decently and I'm behind and I only have the Andrews, it might do a little more damage than I would if I only had Zonias.
and it
But
definitely just
but
felt like
it's
he wasn't on
definitely
the same
more
page
than that.
though. He just
Yeah,
didn't
yeah.
feel like he was on
Okay.
the same page with
Yeah.
his team there
I don't
because
think
his
it was
team
just
felt
him.
like his
I think it
team.
was the whole team,
Yeah, like
bro.
the team wasn't on the same page. it definitely felt like his team still wanted to try to find these fights in the mid game, and Perks was definitely on just like another plane of existence. He was never there at the beginning of the fights. He was always
Yeah.
coming in late.
See,
He was dropping these
that's
bad
what
ultis. Like I think he just played bad that game too, but like his itemization, I think just
I
I
think the
just think
biggest thing is what you're saying is right, but I think I completely disagree on what happened. I think what was happening was they were starting fights before everyone was ready or in a position to help.
yeah,
And
like
I feel like that's completely different than, oh, he just decided to stand way over there and do nothing until the very end and then all.
there was a couple of the fights where he literally was just doing nothing. He was standing at red buff while everybody's positioning for a fight, and he's just standing over there by red buff. Like he's not getting wards, he's not getting vision, he's not flanking, he's just standing there. And
I'm
like they're
assuming
all getting
they're
into
just
a fight, and then he
yeah.
comes in late, and it's just like, why is he this late to the fight? Everybody else is in position, everybody else is ready to fight, and it's a 4v5 without him. Like, what
I'm
happened?
assuming in those situations his team is like trying to position for a fight, but waiting for him to show up, and then before he actually shows up, either they get caught or someone on his team sees something that, oh, I can make a play right
Like
now.
an easy pick. Here's an easy pick. We
Yeah,
got
yeah.
this. And
And
then
then
he's not
they
there. There's no follow up.
yeah.
It
Yeah, I
it
don't
was
think that's a thing where, oh, it's his fault. It's like, bro, it's everyone's fault. Like
oh definitely it's everybody's fault
if
in
you
that
know
game.
someone's not there and
I
you still decide to fight, that's your
it,
gamble.
it's
Like,
definitely the entire team's fault. They all fucked up in some way or another, except maybe Mickey and Wonder. I think the two of them definitely had a solid game that game. Not enough so that it helped them win it, but like they both played really well. It just it just came down to just really stupid choices by the team. The big thing I just wanted to highlight from the Perk side of it was that was a very uncharacteristic game of his. Like there, like we said, he's multiple times he's not in position. Multiple times he's dropping really funky ults. He's itemizing super safe, and then his follow up items after that just didn't make any sense. Like it just I don't know. He's usually this person that can adapt and do really well.
I mean,
And it just didn't look right in my
I don't
mind
think
there. Like
either of us are in a position to know what items to build are right.
it's
Other than the Zonias, maybe, like if you want to criticize that, but
the
even then, I don't think.
Zonia's is arguable, but like
Yeah,
it could still
it's
work.
like,
But his next items just didn't make sense, right? Like he didn't go for any of the next items you need generally on Rumble. He just kind of went. He just kind of went for what looked like a funky build. Like he's already kind of behind,
wait,
and
how
then
much Rumble do you play? And how much do you play against a comp like that
so
with a team where your
so
top lane
while
team
I'm not a person that plays
and at that level,
Rumble
like,
is extremely is picked extremely often in a lot of different regions. And watching a Rumble fall behind, I've seen the Zonias. I've seen exactly what you say. They try to get those people to kind of bait into them, and depending on how much the other person understands how impactful Rumble is without a Leandries, they most often can go into them and stuff like that. But generally, they'll either build a Leandries or a Morello or some type of other like thing that assists their damage well. Like usually they have the Zonias and it's their first item, but they're not like two Zonias into Morellos. It's like, oh, I've lost one, I'm maybe down 10, 15 farm. I get my Zonias a little bit after I would have gotten Leandries, and I'm already into my Oblivion Orb. Like I've already started this about 20-minute mark, right? Perks is starting to get to his second item like at 25 minutes, which just shows that he's like really, really behind.
I mean, they were funneling Wonder that game. That's the only thing too.
Yeah, and I don't know. Then it just to me then it just doesn't. If they're funneling Wonder so hard, why is then Perks out of position so often, right? Like if he's not going off and gathering all the farm, if he's not the one getting funneled, why is he always out of position where his team is? Like many of the times they were in 4v5s and Perks was the one late to the fight. Like it just there is a lot of fault to what he did that game.
Right.
Itemization might have not been the main.
Fights going that game. I remember the fights going, people showing up one at a time.
There was two specific
There was
fights that were either
definitely-
3v4 or 4v5. There's two specific ones where
Actually,
more of the team are positioned together.
Right.
And Perks was, but no matter what, Perks was pretty much the last one to every fight, exception of one where he got caught. And
then I definitely remember fights where he did show up late, like when his team was already being collapsing. But I don't think that was the thing where he was like he showed up late because he just decided not to show up. It was the other team forcing them into a fight. It wasn't where he just randomly decided, oh, I don't want to be over there. Like,
yeah,
and for the most part, I don't I think if he was somewhere else, usually it made sense to me. Like I don't get where you would want him to be. Like,
Well,
because if you
so
ever go with the team in that situation, they'd be losing somewhere else. Because there'd be a different lane that would have been either pushed up or not being pushed out. Like,
so then
I think it's
you
just
have
one
to
of those
guess where.
situations.
So you have to choose which one's going to be the bigger loss, right? Like
Yeah,
you have
and
to take a loss if
I
he's
think
going over
either
there.
way, the enemy team is gonna pick a situation where you're gonna lose really hard. I
But
don't think it's a
that's usually what
situation.
G 2s really good at, right? Is being the ones who are in charge of
Yeah,
who's
yeah,
losing
yeah.
what.
They're definitely better at that usually, but they did not do it this game. And my point is, once they're behind enough, there's no right decisions like that would have
They're changing. Yeah,
made
once you're
them
behind
good.
enough, it's a
Like
done
it's
deal.
yeah,
You're trying to grasp at straws. But there was just points in the game where it just felt like okay, he's doing damage control when the team's trying to pick a fight. Like there are just moments where it just seems like he was on one page and the team's on another page. Like they continued to play the normal G2 kind of super aggressive style when he's playing damage control, and it just felt like they just weren't he definitely felt like he was playing a different game than what his team was playing very often in that game to me. Like, yes, while he could be there in many situations, this is probably the right call. What his team is doing is not necessarily the right call, but if he's there, it could become a pick. Like, he could still offer something. Maybe he gets kills. It's a bit riskier, but G2's never been afraid to take risks. Like, they play ridiculously weird comps that are super risky in draft, and they execute them and get crap tons of kills and snowball out of control. Like, G2 is a risk taking team. The fact that, yes, they're behind, any game they'd been set behind previously in even in the split, they generally played aggressive and tried to come back from it. Occasionally they lost from it, but in most situations when they still played their style, they won. It feels like he just kind of went to a damage control style, which isn't necessarily what G2 does. They generally are forcing the other people to play damage control, so being set behind, I just don't think the rest of his team is really ready to play that as well as he is, because I guess he's always damage control for the team, right? Like we said, he's
mm,
kind of that rock. He's that solid person. He's always kind of the fail safe. So he went to play damage control this game, and the rest of his team just didn't. So it just felt like that's why to me it felt like he was really out of place here. Is like, okay, imagine if he's set up in a specific fight that they were going for. Maybe it was a 2v3 that they thought was a 2v1 catch. Say he's positioned there to come in late just in case. Well, if he's positioned to do that, it turns into a 3v3. It's not nearly as bad of a situation as it could have been. It could damage control save them from that situation. But oftentimes, he's not actually backing them up. That's the point that I was like, it just, as a team, felt real bad. And I just felt like he being as veteran as he is and how much he's usually the failsafe and damage control for his team, he just didn't play his role to usually what he does. But let's move past G2 because there's a lot of other regions other than EU, and we've already spent about 45 minutes kind of specifically talking about G2. Um, so let's move to the easy one, right? Let's move to North America because there ain't much to talk about for this region, right? I don't think there is, at least. Um, Other than I think C9's kind of found themselves, right? They seem to be playing their style, and that seems to just be extraordinarily dominative. Um, so I want to hear what you think are the strengths to C9 because my opinion of it is that they're just a dominative team. They have a very good understanding of how to control the map, and Blabber and Niski just seem to be extremely good at pairing up and just controlling either the mid lane or the side lanes together and just roaming and taking control of the map early.
no, I honestly don't know because it feels like everyone's just so much worse than them. I can't even tell what they're doing that much better. It just seems like everyone else is really bad. But it is cool
Yeah,
to see Sven do good again. Sven looks really good again.
yeah,
So
definitely better than TSM Sven.
yeah, I don't know what's up with TSM, but bro, they
They
always
kill their
make
players.
players.
It's got to be management, right? They've had almost the exact same management every time they
Yeah,
take good players. It's got to be
all
Reggie. I think it's
positive.
Reggie.
Yeah, I think they just don't know how to talk or use their players, talk to their players and use their players. But because definitely in soccer, that was definitely a huge thing that I remember where the coach can just ruin the environment and no one wants to play. Even when you're trying your best, it's completely different than on a team where the coach knows how to make the team mesh together. Play together well.
Yeah, much like Reaper. Reaper seems to just be getting these everybody to just form together. I think they definitely did. The one thing that
But
C9 did better than everybody else is they practiced, right? Like nobody else really boot camped. Nobody else really melded together and tried to work as a team. And they spent was it 2 or 3 weeks in Korea for their support and ADC to get used to each other. Like that's huge. That's huge trying to build synergy there. Like at the preseason, like they spent a lot of time making sure their team became coordinated and worked together, and it just showed. Like they were just ready as a team, and it felt like everybody else was kind of dog shit in comparison.
the biggest thing that I can say, we don't know anything about these coaches, right? Like, there's like little interviews and stuff, but we don't know how they interact with their players. Like, because with what I said earlier with the
Mhm.
coaches, there's some of my coaches that were fucking dog shit, and they know how to talk and PR, and talk to other people to make themselves look like they're great, but they're fucking garbage. And there's other coaches where they're fucking amazing, but they don't say anything to other people. Like, the biggest thing is, it seems like it's kind of like Bill Belichick, where
Yeah,
he doesn't he doesn't give a fuck what people think about him. He just does his job. And
and
if
he
you
does it
didn't know
well.
yeah, like if you didn't know he was a coach of an extremely successful organization, you wouldn't see from his interviews that he's like some amazing genius, right? And a lot of my coaches that were good were like that too, where they're not really like trying to look good or anything. They just do their fucking job. So we don't know like what any of these coaches are really like. But
Yeah,
the biggest thing I can tell you about a coach that impacts the way I played, which watching some of the TSM shit that kind of made me cringe, was the best coaches I had knew what the players were good at and what they were bad at. Instead of just trying to tell us that we needed to stop doing the bad things and start doing better. Like what the video with Turtle where they tell him not to flash, bro. That that's what made me. That's what what I remember from my bad coaches doing. What my good coaches did was they would find a way. They wouldn't like try to force you to change. They tell you it's bad, but they wouldn't expect to fix the situation by making you change. They would fix the situation by either giving you champions that fucking or not champions, but putting you in a position with your teammates where you weren't allowed to make your mistake as often. Do you get what I mean? Like, let's say Wild Turtle, for an example. If he's prone to retardedly flashing in, being overtly aggressive, and dying, give him a support that can prevent him from doing that as much. Do you get what I mean?
yeah,
It's like what I said with 09 the other day, where when you were saying, yeah, he's going to be retardedly aggressive and fight and die. And then
yeah.
my point.
Set it up so that he's not in those positions as often.
And if you know he plays like that, then as a jungler, you need to play around him slightly too, because you know he's going to draw jungle pressure. You know that no matter what you say, he's not going to stop doing that, or even if he stops, it's not going to stop enough to where it's going to change the game, right? You need to be the person who steps in and changes that. So I was thinking, like, with Wild Turtle, yeah, I'm not saying it would have made him a great player or changed TSM's output, but it would have made more sense, like, okay, then give him a supports like Nautilus, or not Nautilus, fucking, sorry, I was looking at Nautilus in the, on that game.
Give him
Give
the
him fucking,
aggressive support. Let's do it.
give him, oh my God, give him a fucking Thresh, or like a Yumi to sit on him, or something like that. Like, give him something where when he's being retarded, his teammate can prevent him from being retarded. You get what I mean?
Lulu.
Like,
Put him on something that
yeah,
saves him and necessarily not
yeah,
encourages him.
so that he can play, so that he can keep playing the way he does, because you probably won't change that, but you can mitigate it with the way your other teammates play. Like,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think good coaches do stuff like that, not where they figure out a way to make them change. Like bro, I don't think a really good
I
coach will be able to make Wild Turtle stop being the way he is, and I
no,
don't think
and that's not a good thing because now you're taking away one of the biggest assets the player
exactly.
has. So
Because it's not like him being aggressive is always bad, right?
no,
There's just moments.
some of his best
Or,
plays are
or,
because of how aggressive he is.
it's kind of like you, yeah. Like I don't think any person can just tell you, Nick, hey, stop being aggressive, stop doing these things. I don't think that's ever gonna happen. I'm not saying that you won't be less aggressive. I can see that happening, but I don't think you're gonna stop being aggressive overall. You're just that type of player.
Yeah,
And
and
I think a good coach would see that and be able to shift things around you to make it work for you more often instead of trying to
definitely,
change you as a
and
person.
and I think personally to me, I think Reaper showcases a lot of that. Like he's that kind of guy. While he's personally he goes out on these interviews and he's very personable with everybody. He doesn't share a whole lot of what exactly he does on a direct one-on-one level, right? he does talk about what he does in terms of encouraging team coordination, implementing certain tactics that he basically is playing mind games with his own team to get his team to do the things that he wants as a result without forcing them to feeling like he's pressuring them to have to do something, right? And that's something that he's kind of alluded to a lot. And even then, the one time that he basically forced his players to get their heads out of their asses was when he benched three of the stars of his team for rookies, and then they came back and did this miracle run. Like that showcases a lot. And then this last split, just he didn't force his team to do really anything outside of what they were going to do anyways. He just put them in an environment better to where they had a chance to succeed, and it definitely looks like that's exactly what happened, right? Like they C9 just felt more prepared. They felt more as a team. The rest of NA just felt like they fell flat, and it just felt like C9 was just ready to play. Like everybody else is trying to figure out how they're going to play or what they're going to do with their teams. And C9 was already ready on that, and they just kind of rolled over people, and they knew how Niski and Bleiber wanted to play with each other, and that progressed even more so throughout the split. You could see as the split went on, they became even more and more comfortable playing with each other. Sven and why can't I think of his support's name right now? Vulcan definitely felt like they were on the same page. And Sven showcased that really, really well. And then Licorice just played Licorice games. So it just all of their players individually did really well, and then as a team they were showing that they're doing really well. And I just feel like that they all kind of just played how they've always played at their best, right? Like none of them seem to have stopped playing their game to either. So they're kind of, I wouldn't put them on the same level as G2, though they possibly could be. We just don't know. We don't get to see an MSI, which kind of sucks because we could have a really awesome MSI right now, with all the different teams that would have been going there. But it definitely just feels like C9 is, again, we're going back to that same idea, right? The same top team that won has now played their game and just dominated their region. So yeah. I think we then should talk about Korea and China kind of together, because there really isn't much to touch up on Korea, unfortunately. As much as I would like, oh yeah, let's get into it. I watched a lot of Korean games this split, and I can tell you that was some of the most boring League of Legends I have ever watched, and some of the shittiest League of Legends I have ever watched. Not because of just the fact that it was boring, because they're playing it slow and playing it the normal Korean style. They were playing it the Korean style, and they were playing it bad. It was real rough to watch. It felt like a lot of the teams didn't know what they wanted to do. They were making a lot of mistakes. It was rough. I don't know how much Korea you watched. Did you watch any of the Korean split?
Yeah, I did. I watched SKT lose randomly at the end of the bunch. That was weird.
Yeah, that was a bit off. And then just the...
I was kind of worried that they were going to go into playoffs and then randomly end, but luckily they didn't.
They didn't. They ended up 3-0ing in finals. The finals was boring as shit to watch. I watched the first... Like I said, I think I only watched the first game in Korea, and I was just like, I'm not watching this. I couldn't get myself to watch it. SKT was winning, and they were just doing SKT things, which is cool, but it just wasn't it just didn't feel like their opponents were on the same level as them, which is real rough to me.
At the start, everyone looked pretty even, and then midway through, KT looked like they were on fire, and then randomly, week 7 and 8, they lost 2 really random games. And they lost really hard. That's why I thought they were going to shit the bed in playoffs. The game they lost to Gen G, or the series they lost, or no, not Gen G. Let's see.
KT or SK or T1?
T1, my bad.
Okay.
SKT.
So yeah.
Okay. So Faker's team. But okay, it was this. When they lost to KT, they lost pretty bad, and when they lost to Damwon Gaming.
Yeah.
Pretty bad.
T1 seemed like they were dominative to begin with. They felt it to begin with. They had some real shit in the bed moments, but the rest of the games were just not good ones to watch. Did you see some of the Damwon games versus a Damwon Afrika game? Did you get to see that game? I think it was the second Damwon Afrika game. This was their game 1 was the 30-minute 5-kill game.
Oh no, I didn't watch all of those.
I think it was their game 1. It was either game 1 or game 2.
I know
it was
games are pretty
bad.
boring,
It was so bad. It was there was no kills. It was literally they just rolled over and died. They didn't seem to be even playing the game. It was and that happened not to that extreme as often, but it happened. That felt like a lot of what Korea was. This was just like one team just had a small lead and just like they didn't really necessarily snowball it. The other team just didn't play into them. Like it just
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
I agree with that.
that was
And
rough. Like that was just rough to watch. It wasn't like, hey, wow, this one team's playing horrible. It was just like this one team is actually playing like trash, and the other team's just playing the game. Like they're not even like they're not playing exceptionally well. They're not doing super superb things. It's just the other team doesn't seem to be playing. Like it
I think that's more of a thing that Korea doesn't really seem to like taking risk at all. Like
yeah.
when you're ahead, you don't really take risks, and when you're behind, you don't really take risks. And then this leads to this like, because I don't think them not taking risks when they're behind. Most of the time, from what I remember, it made sense like because they just didn't know what to do. Like, and then
I think the loss of Tracker's Knife killed Korea. I think that's literally the end of Korea right there. Is Tracker's Knife.
no, at the end, I think they all looked the top three teams, maybe even four, looked pretty good. KT, Dragon X, T1, and
KT
Gen.
Dragon X started looking
But
much better towards the end of the split. Like the beginning was good-ish for both of them. The middle was kind of rough, and then towards the end, they definitely seemed to be shoring up a lot of their weaknesses. Um, the playoffs to me just didn't seem very fun. Like it didn't feel as good. Like in comparison to like even in EU, like EU seemed exciting, I guess, because
EU
Mad
was
Lions
exciting as fuck. Yeah,
because Mad Lions was just like
yeah, that was
surprisingly good,
exciting.
and I was really happy to see a lot of rookies just kind of giving it to a lot of these pro players that have been veteran pro players for a while and standing their own. Like the first best of five for G2 Mad Lions is awesome to see that. Second one not so much. Theirs versus Fnatic not so much, but like there were some exciting games on the east side. North America had, as much of a shit show as North America was, some okay games every now and then. It really wasn't the greatest, but like
I
there was
don't think
occasionally some good games.
I don't think it was the games as much as it was just. It's more exciting because, in my opinion at least, I'm more attached to the teams. Like I want to see if TSM will do good. I want to see
Yeah,
if if this upset Mad Lions made will actually fuck G2 in the end. Like there was a lot of exciting stuff.
there's some cooler storylines coming from it,
Yeah,
right? Like
the
Korea's
other
kind
thing
of been
I
sleeper
don't
for a while now. They've been resident sleeping for a while. There hasn't been a lot of storylines. There's not as many players that I care
sure.
about in Korea as much anymore.
The other thing
Um,
is the teams are or the teams and the players are like all over the place, right? Like, cause if you think about Liquid, their roster has been together for a while. If you think about TSM, they always have Bjerg. Like, no matter who's in the other roles, you always have the TSM Bjerg storyline, and then like,
I think Korea only has two constants, which is Keen on
yeah,
Afrika and SKT has
yeah,
Faker, and that's it.
everyone else has been like everywhere, bro. Like,
Everybody else
like
moves
Deft,
between team to team.
yeah, like Deft is like, bro, what team is Deft on this split? He's on every fucking team, bro.
Hey, is Def
And
going
it's
back to
always,
China this
and
split?
yeah,
Like,
and it's always like, bro, he's on like some random super team that he always thinks gonna do good in.
and then they
And then
shit the
they
bed in
fall apart.
playoffs.
Yeah,
It's the same storylines, but
well,
it's
like,
like there's nothing you can get attached to,
exactly. There's
which
it's
is
hard.
unfortunate because I want to see Afrika do real well. Like I really want to see Afrika do well because I like Keen and I actually like Afrika, but like it's just expected. They're at best going to be third or fourth. Like that's to me expected there. And that's the other thing that I don't like about Korea as well is it's predictable, right? Like we could basically when we see a roster, we're like, all right, this is probably going to be it. You know, that's why Griffin was so exciting, right? Was this brand new team came in with no names and they just stormed the fucking beaches. Like
Honestly, this is like one of the craziest splits that I wasn't sure who was gonna win. Because Genji looked good, Dragon X looked good, SKT
they looked
T
it looked
good.
like it was close and then it just in
And
playoffs did not
playoffs,
feel as close. Just
and then
didn't feel
playoffs happened, I was just like, oh, never mind.
yeah, it just felt like SKT just kind of just like, all right, yeah, we're back to being us, and they just won everything. And it
Yeah.
so to me, I think the biggest thing that comes down to what Koreans can really kind of implement for people's solo queue is just get good scrub. Like that's the only thing I ever really feel like to take away from Korea is just like mechanically most of these players are just really good, and because they switch around so often, there's not often as much just innate team synergy, right? Like some of them do. Like SKT definitely felt like that was their big focus pretty much every time is how do we draft around Faker, have the team play around Faker. That's always felt like what SKT does.
I definitely don't think Korea is a mechanically intensive region at all. They're all really good players that are very smart about the game, I think. But none of them are like. I think EU is more of the mechanically
I guess
gifted.
I guess okay, maybe mechanics is the wrong choice there. They're all really talented players, and they just
Yeah,
play slow. But like,
yeah,
so
they
like their
know what.
solo queue is completely different though. That's the thing that's nuts about it though.
They're very good at understanding like what they shouldn't be doing. Oh
Yeah,
yeah, and I think you're right. The solo queue is completely, but I think it's because their their structure is way better at like a team environment than any of the other
yeah,
agents.
which is kind of nuts to me. Like it's their solo queue is so different. The way they play is so different. That taking anything from Korea is like I say just with a grain of salt.
I think the
There's
fact that the solo queues like that is what makes the system work so well
yeah,
and why they were so good compared to everyone else at first. Because you have solo queue to practice your mechanics, and then you have teams and orgs that are good at setting up teams and teaching you how to play as a team.
yeah, and they immediately went to having good coaching staffs, having they implemented a system that allowed them to be dominative. And when the rest of the world got onto it, leave it to the country that has a shit ton of money to make the best teams, right? Like leave it to China to then go and make so many goddamn good teams now, right? And pick
Right,
up
the other
good
thing is
players.
they have way more players
Yeah, they have way more players.
and way more teams. Their league is fucking huge, isn't
They have a 16 team league or something like that. Like they have a giant league. Because there's
it?
top
There's like
eight,
two.
bottom eight, I think. I want to say,
Yeah,
and they're all in the
there's two
same tier.
groups, right? Oh no, they're not in the
So the
same.
way theirs works is I know they have a 16-man team. So you have the bottom eight and the top eight. You make top eight, you're in playoffs. Bottom eight
Right, well,
gets there's a chance for relegation on the bottom two teams, and then they have their
there's
challenger scene,
one
which is also
team.
16. So they have 32 teams between their two leagues, right?
Yeah.
That's freaking huge.
Wait, they have 17 fucking teams. How does
17
that
teams.
work? Wait,
I guess the bottom one is auto relegated. The bottom two after that are in the contention. I have no idea actually.
yeah, I wonder why they went with an odd number. That's fucking weird. Oh, maybe it's so they get a bye week.
Oh, maybe that's kind of cool. Actually, that would be a
Yeah, that
smart
would
plan.
make sense.
Um, so, if have you did you watch much of the LPL? Because I found myself watching much more LPL than I've watched
No,
LCK,
I watched
especially with
more
my
LCK
sleep schedule
than
being as crap as
LPL.
it is.
They're usually on around the same time. I think they like slightly overlap during the
They are, and
Yeah,
so
I would
like
watch
I thought
LCK
I would watch
instead.
more LCK, but I would watch some LCK, and then I saw games like that Damwon game, and I was just like, God, I don't want to watch this. And then I go to LPL, and then you have like Doinby playing something ridiculous in mid, or some of the other LPL mid laner just popping off, and it was so much more exciting to watch, which is kind of cool to me. Is I feel like they have a lot of those team intense environment like Korea, but they're all individually playing like the LEC, which is just this nuts combination of the two of those ideas, right? Like you have the LEC where everybody's kind of just trying to become mechanical gods, grind it out, and just kind of hard carry 1v9 with your team. Is what a lot of those teams end up feeling like. They're kind of moving more to, hey, we actually need to make super teams and are building new and bigger teams every year, it seems. And then like Korea, like we said, are kind of this team environment that is kind of slow. It's a bit more slow paced. It's more about the can you take the objectives to then crush out the enemy team and slowly just kind of starve them of resources to win. And then you go to the LPL, and there's a hybridization of both of those in there. You have teams like JDG that's extremely good at picking and making picks, going forcing fights around neutral objectives, and just working overall as a team. Who ended up just winning the league. And then you had like TES, which were just really good team fight team that also just had really good laners that also would just snowball their lane advantage to making sure nobody could contest them at objectives. RNG went with a weird style this split, depending on if they had Uzi in or not. They played around bot lane or played around top lane. It was kind of weird. IG again just played around the shy. Like there was all types of different variations in LPL, which I think makes it a much more exciting league because you'll have teams that play the Korean style. You'll have that play similar to the LEC style, but every team kind of has their own identity. And they have a core fundamental player that really is kind of the name and face of the team. And in many of those cases, it happens to be their mid laner. But they all play so vastly different from each other. It's so interesting to watch. Um, One of the biggest things, though, that I loved about the LPL is that they don't play Senna. Like, Senna never made it into the pick ban pool, really, almost at all this last split. I think she had like a 0.2% ever showing up. That was nuts. But, like, I think one of the biggest things that, like, that LPL encourages is kind of that reiterating thing that we kind of talked about in the previous regions, right? Play your game. And I think they prove it to an even more extreme than like how G2 proves it. Because now in 3 or 4 splits in a row, we've had a different team take the LPL title, and each one of them plays vastly different than the other team that has had it before. And that to me is just a core thing that is just the LPL showcases even more so than everybody else, is that if you just play your style and you get really, really good at it, you inevitably will just get, you'll just get to that point that you'll actually improve naturally from just learning your ability to how to play, right? Or maybe you disagree. What are your opinions on that?
Honestly, I didn't watch much of LPL, so I don't really know much about them. Other than the fact that all their teams look really good. And I mean it in the sense of fucking the Shy and IG are dominating, and FPX isn't even dominating anymore, right?
So IG made
Like,
playoffs, and FPX I think just barely hit playoffs, and then they got locked. I think both of them got knocked out round one, quarterfinals.
yeah. So if you're good enough to compete with them, I think that means like pretty much every fucking team in the region is or a lot at least, are really strong, right? It makes sense to
Yeah,
me.
the part that caught me off guard is that their 2 top teams were Top Esports, a newly built roster off of the previous Top Esports, Top Esports Gaming, which was their name beforehand. Exact same club, just a new owner, and they dropped the gaming, which was weird. Exact same team, even. Um, the only real big thing about that roster is like they picked up Jackie Love, and then they had Knight in the mid lane, which was this supposed LPL god who's never really made it onto a team that's done almost anything. And then I want to who did they? They also had Karsa in the jungle, like so. I have some pretty big names on their team, and they ended up just being a really good team throughout the split. I think they took first, and they were the favorites to win. And then JDG was the 5th place team, and the only name on that team that I knew was Kanavi. And the only reason I know that name is because of the Griffin scandal with him. That's it. That's the only reason I know who that is. And that team of basically no names took uh, took TES or Tops Esports to Game 5 and won it in 5. So that just tells you, like, even though some of the players that are no names just come out of nowhere in left field and can win, that's just how competitive this region is, which is nuts, and pretty awesome. And just these 2 teams alone, JDG played, like I said, they played more of the skirmish heavy, force fights around objectives, while Tops is get lane priority, win lanes, go take objectives when they can't fight us type team. So, like, that's 2 very vastly different styles. And, like, and then you go to IG. Again, they play around top and go for Rift Herald and try to get lane advantages through objectives. Or you go to RNG, which when Uzi's there, they play around dragons. When Uzi's not there, they play around Rift Heralds. Like, teams have different identities depending on which players they have in. Like, it's just so much different, and it feels more evolved as a game watching them than compared to the other regions. But, like, I think the biggest thing from that region, the only thing I can really pull from all these regions together, is play your style. And inevitably, as long as you are trying to improve on that style, play the way that's good for you and find ways that help you improve. changing yourself to whatever each of these top teams are going to do is just going to make it harder on you, because now you have to learn how they're playing and then see if you can do that, if it's fun for you. Because I think ultimately, if you lose fun with the game, you lose the motivation to play, and then you're just never going to get better. But that's kind of all I had left. I don't know. Was there anything you wanted to add about any of this, or anything that you think we kind of left out? Or
About LPL or everything in general?
everything in general. I think we're coming kind of to the close here. I think we've kind of hit the big point on the head here.
I don't really have anything to add. I think our other discussions were pretty long.
I think they were. Uh, but yeah, I think that just about does it then. Hopefully, there's some type of insight somebody watching this can get from this. I know this ended up being kind of a long discussion, and it kind of probably went on a little bit more of a tangent than it was supposed to, but I think that's kind of some of the fun of it sometimes. So, if you guys enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a comment down below and let us know that you liked it. If you want to see more stuff with this, if you want to hear me and Sarc kind of ramble at each other and argue about things, feel free to let me know that as well. And if he's wanting to come back, we might have him back next week and just kind of chat about something else. And I guess that's about it, guys. So I'll catch you guys in the next video, and have yourselves a wonderful, wonderful day.